So here is today's amazing message. It's week 4 of I Love My Church, and it's taken by our very own Mark Pomeroy.
Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us today. And a special shout out to those of you who are joining us for the first time. We have an Elevate online experience every single week. So if you're here for the first time, we hope you're enjoying this. And we'd love to see you come on the journey with us next week and beyond. Now, any sports fans out there, particular sport here in Australia, you might like Aussie rules. Maybe you might be a fan of the most popular played sport on the planet, soccer, as old school we still like to call it. Maybe you're a fan of basketball, NBA. Here in Australia, we have the NBL. Maybe even have your favorite team, within one of those codes. Like I actually stopped having a favorite team because I followed my favorite team in whatever sport it was, and it was just so stressful that I stepped away, and I'm just a fan of the sport now. Having said that, just last week here in Perth, our local basketball team, the Perth Wildcats, they had made the playoffs, and whilst I wasn't following them closely during the season, I took an interest. Go Perth. And so I watched, and it was a best-of-3 series against a Melbourne team, and Perth lost the first game of the playoff. It's like, okay. Well, the second game I watched, it was here in Perth, and it was so stressful. And Perth won, so the series was drawn 1-1, and it was going to a decider from the best-of-3. And, well, sadly, Perth lost the third game of that particular playoff round, and yes, super stressful. But here's the thing. About an hour later, there's no problem. My blood pressure had gone back to normal. My heart rate had gone back to normal. Because at best, I was just a fan. Like, that's literally it. And like a fan, we use that word, kind of could be defined as an enthusiastic admirer. And I use that word because when people start to follow Jesus, most of the time they start that journey as a fan. Okay, I'm now on Team Jesus. I've got the cross. I've downloaded the Bible app. I turn up to watch the games. I'm a fan. Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Jesus. And look, there's nothing wrong with that early in our journey. However, Jesus wants to take us on a journey where we move and grow from being a fan to becoming a fully devoted follower, to move from spectators to participants, to get out from the stands and get into the game, to use the gifts that God's given us to increase the effectiveness of the local church. And as a bonus, when we do that, we will find greater joy, greater meaning, and greater purpose in our own lives. So, speaking of the Bible app, if you've got that downloaded to your device, how about you scan this flow code? It's going to take you to Acts chapter 6. Now, Acts is like the history book of the early church, covers about the first 30 years of the early church. And while you're doing that, let me just give you a bit of a recap, because today is week 4 of a series that we've been teaching and journeying through called I Love My Church. And this year, 2025, is the 75th birthday of Elevate Church. And so we're both celebrating our birthday. Yay. Happy birthday, Elevate. 75 years. It's pretty good. And we're asking the question, what is our responsibility? What are the opportunities that we need to take a hold of to pioneer the next chapter, to take what God's already done and to see Him do even more and to use us right in the front lines of doing that? And so we've been taking some inspiration from the early church, who were literally the original pioneers. So I want to drop us into a slice of their history, which was somewhere in year 1 to 5. Historians haven't quite sort of landed on the exact date, but needless to say, it was in the very, 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 very early days of the church. And we're going to see that they found themselves at a very critical point right in this early part of their journey, the establishment of the church, which can be characterized by, very simply, there were too few people doing too many things. And so they were literally under threat of pulling apart right at the outset. And so this is what Luke records at that point in the church's history. But as the believers rapidly multiplied, there were rumblings of discontent. The Greek-speaking believers complained about the Hebrew-speaking believers, saying that their widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food. So the 12, which were the leaders of the early church that Jesus had appointed, called a meeting of all the believers. So you know things are pretty heavy when they call a meeting and it's a meeting of everyone. Let's get everyone there and let's sort this thing out. And this was an internal threat. It was characterized by division and frustration, by sideways energy, by gossip, and ultimately it was a complaint about church leadership. So that's not a new thing. And here's the reality. I have seen more teams and more churches ripped apart by internal threats than I have by external threats. So this is a really big deal. It was a big deal then, and there's things that we can learn from their situation that are vital for us to get around today. And here's a spoiler alert. They called the meeting and essentially they highlighted to the believers, this was the 12, the leaders of the church, they highlighted to the believers this idea that there were too few people doing too many things. In essence, the pattern or the expectation, should I say, from the believers was that the church leadership should do everything. And well, that just proved unworkable. And so they had to navigate that. And interestingly, that same mindset and that same expectation that the leaders should do it all, do all the ministry, that still exists 2,000 years later in some parts of the church and in the minds of some Jesus followers. Like there's this kind of delineation between the ministers, who are the people who are paid, by the church, let's say, and everyone else. And that the ministers do the ministry. If you want prayer, go to the minister. If you're in hospital, get the minister to visit you. And that list goes on, and that list goes on, and it goes on and on and on and on. And the rest of us, the non-ministers, well, your job is like to receive the ministry or to observe the ministry being done to other normal people like yourself. Well, this is problematic. It was problematic then, and it's problematic today. And we will see it's not biblical. Not only is it not biblical, and by the way, part of the problem is it's actually untenable for the minister or the ministers to do all the ministry. It's just not tenable. And I know from personal experience with friends of mine all around the world, and incidentally, the statistics bear this out, this not biblical expectation on ministers to do all of the ministry is one of the reasons there is a shockingly high attrition rate of people every year who step away from being in a church leadership role because it's just worn them out. So it's unbiblical, and that plays out in it being untenable, but it's also a limiter on the church because there's only a select few people, always the minority, who are paid to be in like a full-time paid ministry role. And if the expectation is that they are to do all of the ministry, well, then it's limited. It's limited to their time and their gifts and their availability. But that's not the biblical pattern. The biblical pattern is that the church is a body and that every single one of us is a part of that body. And because we're a part of the body, the church, we have a role to play. Some are eyes, some are ears, some are hands, some are feet, etc. And each part, and this is what Paul says, that the body builds itself up stronger, more effective, as each part does its work. So everyone is a minister. But look, they bumped up against this not biblical mindset very early on. And I will come back to that. They also, the way they approached it, well, that was problematic. Luke uses the phrase rumblings of discontent. And how many of you know that rumblings of discontent rarely make your life better? They rarely make your relationships better. They rarely make your workplace better. And they almost never make your church better. So I just want to take us on a very quick flyover of some of the ways rumblings of discontent can surface. And I want to give us some better strategies of how we can approach things. Because I'm not going to say if there's a problem or something or a gap or something needs some attention, just ignore it. No one's saying that, but I am saying that rumblings of discontent is almost never the best approach to address the problem at hand. So here's the first one. Avoid gossip. Now, you know how this goes. Hey, did you know? Hey, have you heard? Hey, you're never going to believe this, but... And in my experience, gossip, especially in the church, plus in every aspect and sphere of life, is one of the most destructive and yet sadly tolerated patterns of behavior. And I know this because it happened to me just recently. A couple of years ago, there was an ex-Elevate attendee who decided it was their responsibility to start a smear campaign against problems that they saw that I had, allegedly. And so they went around gossiping, and they gossiped with their list, their rumblings of discontent to anybody who was willing to listen. And I remember while this was going on, I received a phone call from one of our team members. And this team member wanted me to know a few things. Well, first of all, they wanted me to know that they had just been on the receiving end of this gossiper's kind of rumblings of discontent rant. Secondly, they wanted me to know that they told the gossiper that what they were saying is actually not true. And thirdly, and this is the integrity piece, this team member wanted me to know that they will always have, that they did have my back in that moment, and that they will always have my back. How many of you know it's better to have people in your life who have your back rather than stab you in the back? Yeah. And so gossip, well, here's one thing I know about gossip. If you want to have more people in your life who have your back, you need to commit to first becoming someone who has other people's back. It's like a chicken or the egg scenario. Because if you're somebody that all the gossip always flows to and flows through, guess what? There's a reason for that. It's because you have developed a reputation of someone who loves to eat up gossip and spit out gossip. But if you want to change, and that very reputation is going to attract more of the people who love to gossip. They'll gossip to you, and warning, when you're not around, they'll gossip about you because it's a pattern. If you want more people around you in your life who have your back, you need to first develop a reputation as someone who has other people's back. And here's what you're going to find very, very quickly. Two things. Number one, the gossip will eventually stop flowing to you because you'll be like, no fun. No fun. You're no fun at the parties. You don't listen to my gossip anymore. And secondly, people will start having your back because they know that you have theirs. Now, if you needed any more convincing than that, look, let me read you something that Jesus' brother James wrote. Now, James, incidentally, was one of the early leaders of the church. He was one of the 12 that had this all believers meeting. So I'm going to read you something that he wrote about gossip. And I need to warn you, just look down and make sure you have your big boy or big girl pants on, because this is some real grown-up adult instruction. All right, here goes. Don't badmouth each other, friends. It's God's word, his message, his royal rule that takes a beating in that kind of talk. No, you're supposed to be honoring the message, not writing graffiti all over it. God is in charge of deciding human destiny. Who do you think you are to meddle in the destiny of others? James drops the mic, walks off. Wow. So when you have someone coming to you with some gossip, ask questions like, excuse me, how do you know this is true? Secondly, why are you bringing this to me? Like, is you bringing this to me helpful to this situation? Is it contributing to the solution? Because if not, I'm not really interested. And if they keep going, just get up and walk away. I've done it. Again and again and again. And trust me, over time, it works. The people around you, you'll start to get a higher caliber and quality of people around you. So here's the first one. Like I said, instead of rumblings of discontent, avoid gossip. Secondly, bring solutions. Like anyone can point out a problem. I think that somebody should. I think that the church should. Yeah, okay, great. Well done. Just about anyone can point out a problem. The real superpower is being able to bring a solution. In fact, there's a superpower beyond bringing a solution. That's saying, God, I want to be part of the solution. So when you see the problem, when you go to the person who can actually kind of help kick things along, offer yourself up as part of the solution. A couple of years ago, I was watching Dave Letterman's show on Netflix where he interviews very famous people, I guess. And this particular one was him interviewing former President Barack Obama. And during that interview, Barack Obama said to David Letterman, and I'll never forget this. He said, when I had the people around me whilst I was president, my favorite 6 words that would come out of their mouths was simply this: let me take care of that. Like, yeah, it's a problem. We need to fix it. Let me take care of that. And in 2025, as we're leaning into pioneering the next chapter, that has to be the mindset and the perspective that we have. Not to point out problems, not even to sort of spitball a solution, but to ultimately say, hey, listen, I think I can be part of the solution. Let me take care of that. Which brings me to the third and final thing that will help us better navigate solving things rather than rumblings of discontent, and that's to get involved. Because one of the things about fans, one of the things that characterizes fans globally is they're all experts. I mean, while they're sitting in the stands or while they're sitting on the couch watching the game on TV, they know better than anybody what should be happening right now. They know what the coach should be doing or what the coach should have done. They know what the players should have been doing or should be doing or should have done. They're the experts. But here's the thing. Things change when you get out of the stands and get on the field, because you soon discover that you don't know everything. You find yourself saying things like, oh, this is a lot more complicated than I realized. Like, you discover that you don't actually know everything, but you put yourself in place to be part of the solution. So, Luke continues, the 12 called a meeting of all the believers, and they said, look, we apostles should spend our time teaching the word of God, not running a food program. And so, brothers, select 7 men who are well respected and are full of the Spirit and wisdom, and we will give them this responsibility. And right there is a word that I think gets overlooked too often when it comes to church. We think of church being attending. We think about church being like, I go to that church. Yet the leaders of the early church, they made this very clear distinction that being part of a church and ultimately being part of the solution is actually about taking up responsibility. And so God's message continued to spread. The number of believers greatly increased in Jerusalem, and many of the Jewish priests were converted too. So here we stand, still at the early stage of 2025, leaning into this question of what does pioneering the next chapter look like, and what's required of me? What's required of each one of us? What's the responsibility that God's called us to? Because it's going to take more than one personality or a handful of ministers. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us. So if you are not yet on the field, if you're still in the stands, then can I invite you? Like, well, no one's invited me. Right here, right now, consider yourself invited to get out of the stands and get on the field, and we'll help you find your fit. We'll help you find the place to use the time and the talents and the treasure that God's entrusted to you, to put it into practice, to leverage it, and to see God use it to increase, elevate church's effectiveness for the glory of God.